Hello, my name is Shane Hernandez, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Georgia under the direction of Dr. Todd Calloway and Dr. Lawton Stewart. Thank you for watching this video today. I'm going to be talking about something that I find very interesting to me. But before I do that, I do want to apologize about the video quality. I am recording outside, and it might cut in and out. I do apologize about that, but if I record it inside, I think I might go crazy. So I do ask for a little leniency when it comes to the video quality today. We're going to be talking about the utilization of ionophore alternatives to increase animal performance and decrease morbidity in stocker cattle in the Southeast United States. But before we do that, I actually wanted to present an outline, mostly because this is kind of a new presentation format for me, but I also wanted to provide a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with an introduction, give a little bit of background on the topic and some studies that relate to that topic. And then we're going to talk about why it actually matters to the beef industry. So I love the theoretical side of science. I love to talk about it and read about it, but if there's no application of that theory, then I think we're not really doing a great service to the industry. And then I want to wrap it up with, why does this all matter to me? So to start, let's talk about some stocker operations. Here in the US, our stocker operations are typically found out west, typically Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska, some of our larger stocker operation states, and that's primarily due to the cost of land. So cost of land is actually the #1 operational cost to a stocker operation. But recently there has been growth here in the Southeast. In 2019 to 2020, there was a 7% increase in herd size in our stocker operations. And there is one advantage that our Southeast operations have over the West, and that's our ability to grow abundant forages. Feed cost is actually the second largest operational cost of stocker operation, and our Southeast operations are able to mitigate some of that cost by developing their herd on forages. There is a downside though. If we just look at, say, TDN or digestible nutrients or net energy of, say, corn compared to our pastures outside of our lush spring pastures, we can see across the board our grain is going to provide more digestible nutrients and net energy compared to some of our forages. And this decrease compared to grains ultimately results in a loss of potential growth or potential development or growth they could have if we were feeding them grains or concentrates. Now, this is important to our producers because our stocker operations are paid by how much they can grow that herd, that animal, how much weight they can put on the animal. And so a loss of potential growth can lead to a loss of potential profit. Now, our producers can supplement the diets of our herds with feed additives, which are fed to increase feed efficiency and decrease morbidity. And here in the US, our most common feed additive is a class of antibiotics known as ionophores. I won't get too deep into ionophores. I think another student's doing a presentation specifically on ionophores. You'll find much more detailed information in that presentation, but I did want to provide a background. So when we talk about ionophore alternatives, we can have something to compare it to. Now, ionophores increase feed efficiency through 2 specific modes of action. One is by decreasing methane production, and the second is by decreasing ammonia production. Now, when we talk about methane in the ruminant animal, it typically means there's a loss of efficiency. Methane can lead to increased acetate production, and when we focus on beef cattle, we really want to focus on that propionate production. Propionate is a 3-carbon chain volatile fatty acid that's used as a base to synthesize glucose, and ultimately leads to increased muscle development or increased growth, which again leads to increased profits for that producer. And when we talk about ammonia, when that feed source is broken down within the rumen, the protein is rapidly degraded into ammonia. Now, if too much ammonia is produced, that excess will actually be converted into urea, a waste product. Now, some of that urea is recycled within the animal, but most of it will actually be eliminated as waste by the animal. So elimination of potential resources that we could utilize. So by decreasing methane and decreasing ammonia production, we actually increase the efficiency of that feed. Now again, ionophores are classified as an antibiotic. So when it comes to consumer perception of antibiotic resistance on a livestock, sorry, I think I was just bit, livestock, increased perception of antibiotic resistance on the livestock operation, we group ionophores into that. Even though studies have found that ionophores do not lead to increased antibiotic resistance, Still, they were banned in the EU as late as 2005, but more recently, there has even been increased limitations on use of antibiotics as growth promoters or even as remedies to illnesses. And that legislation has even found its way over to the US. While we haven't adopted that legislation, there's still that legislative pressure on our industry. There is also another incentive to look for ionophore alternatives. When we look at the marketing and the economic benefit of organic operations, we find that our consumers are willing to pay premiums or willing to pay more money for products that were developed in an organic operation. These organic operations aren't allowed to use antibiotic options, so they can't take advantage of the feed efficiency provided by ionophores. So providing them with an organic alternative allows them to take advantage of feed efficiencies while also promoting their product through these organic marketing channels. So there's still that legislative and marketing incentive to look for these alternatives. When we talk about ionophore alternatives, we typically look at plants, mostly due to their historic use in human health medicine. There are over 500,000 plant species on Earth, but there are typically only 300 to 400 that are used for medical purposes, and only a percentage of that actually have antimicrobial properties. And fun fact, alfalfa actually produces antimicrobial peptides. Of that group of possible ionophore alternatives, there are 3 that are most commonly highlighted. One is the cinnamaldehyde produced by the cinnamon, extracted from the cinnamon, capsaicin, extracted from capsicum or peppers, and eugenol, which is extracted from cloves. There have been in vitro studies comparing some of these plant compounds to a control and a monensin, and when we look at that, we see that typically our plant compounds do decrease acetate production compared to our control, and specifically in this study, our garlic clove actually increased propionate. So 2 things we look for when we talk about ionophore alternatives in relation to rumen fermentation. But there is an issue when it comes to looking for these plant extracts, and that's are all ionophore alternatives, and that there's just so many to choose from. And then there's combinations to test and concentrations of those combinations. So we're very, very early on when it comes to ionophore alternatives. And I say that mostly to set up, this is more of an opinion, but it is based off of some studies that I will present here shortly. I think that capsaicin actually might really provide some great benefits to our southeastern stalker calf. Now, there are studies that suggest that they do modify the rumen. They do have antimicrobial properties similar to the clove and to our cinnamaldehyde, but our capsaicin also provides some interesting health benefits to the animal as well. So when we look at capsaicin, we first must talk about the actual pepper itself, the capsicum. There are over 20 to 27 known species of capsicum. And when you read papers, they talk about the capsicum extract, and they're generally referring to the capsaicin within that pepper. We've all heard of the Scoville scale, and people think about that as how hot a pepper might be, but it really is just measuring how much capsaicin is within that pepper. Now, capsaicin is a lipophilic compound, and it was produced as a defense mechanism for the pepper, so to prevent insects and animals eating that pepper. But it's pretty utilitarian in terms of a compound. We use it in armed law enforcement as pepper spray. There's medical purposes for it. It can actually use as a pain management solution. We use it as a cuisine, as a spice. But the effect it has on animal physiology, I think, can also be used to provide animal health benefits here in the Southeast. So when we look at a paper by Rodriguez Pedro back in 2012, he found it in a feedlot diet to some steers, and he found some interesting things. First, he found that when measuring post-feeding and 2-hour intervals intake, he found that the capsicum or capsaicin supplemented animals per meal intake went down, but overall intake actually increased. So he observed that while per meal the animal ate less, it's the animal supplemented with capsaicin still ate more overall. This is important, at least for feedlot, because acidosis is a big issue. If an animal eats too much too quickly, too much concentrate too quickly, it will produce too much lactate, rumen pH will drop, and it'll cause a bunch of negative health issues. Now, if we spread those meals out, smaller meals over a longer period of time, we can actually limit the possibility of acidosis occurring. They also found that water intake, funny enough, actually increased when compared to the control animals. So our capsaicin supplemented animals possibly ate food that was a little too spicy and they drank more water, which could benefit animals in a heat stress situation and encourage them to consume more water. When we look at the effect of capsaicin on in acute stress situations, so stress within 4 hours, we actually found that capsaicin will decrease haptoglobin and cortisol production when compared to our control animals. So there are some real, in addition to fermentation benefits, there are some real health benefits to supplementing with capsaicin. Now, why would this matter to the beef industry? Well, beef industry is specific to the Southeast. One, it can hopefully serve as an ionophore alternative, modifying the rumen, increasing propionate, decreasing acetate, decreasing ammonia production. Two, increase that performance, so increase feed efficiency, but also decrease morbidity. So hopefully mitigating some of the effects of heat stress by prolonging meals, eating smaller meals over a longer period of time, and mitigating some of the effects of heat stress by increasing water take and decreasing acute stress, specifically during post-weaning. And it will help during the growth in the Southeast market. So as our Southeast market grows, we'll have more organic options, more organic alternatives to ionophores here in the Southeast. Now, why is this specifically important to me? In terms of research, I'm specifically focused on how we can use nutrition to improve animal health and performance. I think that there's a lot to that old saying, you are what you eat. And I think there's ways that we can improve some of these specifically through nutrition. So before a vet even needs to see the animal, maybe we can improve their health or set them up for a potentially healthier life by feeding them properly or supplementing their feed. And I think some of these ionophore alternatives or these secondary plant compounds may likely be that key, that supplement that can actually help these animals. But that wraps it up. I do think capsaicin, maybe possibly in combination with some of these other compounds, can provide an ionophore alternative effect. And more importantly, I think in terms of what we do here in the Southeast, especially in the summer, manage some of that heat and mitigate some of that weaning stress that happens when we come straight from weaning and going right into a stalker situation. I want to thank everyone for listening, and I hope I provided some interesting information for you. Thank you. Oh, also, here's my literature cited.